In this lesson, we're going to go into a little bit more depth on the stroke menu. I'm going to tear the stroke menu off from the top of the screen and dock it on the right-hand side. And we currently have the standard brush selected. So by default, the standard brush is set to the dot stroke with no alpha, and that's just a freehand stroke. Now we've already seen that we can change our brush strokes here with the stroke palette. And we also know that the stroke palette gives us some variations in settings. For example, if I go to the spray stroke and change to an alpha like alpha 7, I can spray instances of that alpha on the surface. I'm going to add a couple subdivision levels here so we've got a little bit more resolution to see that detail. Now, if I go to the spray stroke, I can, if I'm painting color, change my color modifier to 0 so it doesn't change my color at all. And I can increase the placement so I can spread out the distance between each individual spray. Like that. Now, if we go back to, say, freehand stroke or dot stroke and alpha 1, here we have things like mouse average, where we can change the average of the mouse stroke to smooth out our stroke. Now, this is a very limited number of options. There's many, many more located under the stroke menu here. Some of these we've already talked about in various tutorials so far, but we'll touch on them again in this one in a single video. So if I change to the damn standard brush and I create a stroke like this, under the stroke menu, I have the ability to change my mouse average. So by default, it's set to 8. If I turn this up to, say, 15, and then draw this stroke, it's going to average that stroke out and help me get a smoother line. If I turn this down, there is not the same degree of averaging, so I get a more sort of meandering or more direct control over every little nook and change in that stroke. Bring that back up to 8. And it might be difficult to see it, but you can feel it when you actually use the stroke. You can jitter your stroke, so there's stroke jitter, and that adds a jitter to that stroke. It's nice for making cracks and variations and things. And here we have stroke imperfection. We can turn that up, and that will add imperfections to the brush stroke. So we'll set this back down and take this back down. Now, modifiers we have seen before. My favorite modifier here is replay last. So I'll like to create a stroke like, say, something like this. And then replay last will repeat my last stroke. So I can keep deepening or raising a stroke just by repeating last. I'll use that when I'm detailing with alphas in a drag rectangle stroke, and I'll use it when I'm trying to create panel lines for hard surface. So if I want to create a panel line, I'll draw that panel line and then replay last multiple times. Now I have this hotkeyed to Alt-1. I believe the default hotkey may be the number 1, but I encourage you to hotkey that brush and use that. Now there is the roll option here, and if I have a brush with an alpha on there, so for example, if I change to the arrow alpha here on the dot stroke, and I draw, that alpha will be duplicated along the length of that stroke. If I turn on roll, it will roll out single instances of that alpha as we go. I can change my roll distance, and that's going to stretch that alpha along that stroke, as you see here. Now there's options under here for Sculptris Pro, which we'll talk about when we get to Sculptris Pro mode. Lazy Mouse is very, very, very effective. This is on by default for the standard brush, and what this does is it puts a red line at the end of your brush, and by default it's a little short. So let's turn it up. Oops, that's lazy step. Turn that up so we can see that line. That line is sort of a delay on the brush stroke, so you can course correct and create a very, very smooth stroke. Let's change to the damn standard brush. Turn up lazy radius, and then if we click and drag, you see we get this nice delay on the brush that helps us course correct and make the best possible curve. We can replay that stroke now with Alt-1, and there we go. Now, I like using the Dam Standard brush with replay stroke for panel lines. So if I go to this helmet model, and let's say we wanted to sculpt some panel lines in here, I would take my Dam Standard brush and turn my draw size down, and probably take my Z intensity and turn it down. And let's say that we wanted a panel line that ran from here to here. Then I would just replay that stroke just by hitting the replay stroke hotkey multiple times. That's going to give me a nice sharp panel line there. This also works nicely with the pinch brush. If I take the pinch brush, which will pinch edges, as you see here, but what I like to do is turn on Lazy Mouse, turn up my Lazy Radius, and then we'll pinch this edge, and then replay that stroke multiple times, and it will sharpen that edge. As you see there, it starts to pinch that gap there as it crosses over it, so we won't traverse across that gap. We'll undo that, and let's pinch a different area here. Let's come up here to the top, and let's do a pinch here. I'll pinch from here to this point, and then replay that stroke. And I can turn up my Z intensity, and then replay the stroke, and it'll be even stronger. And you see it's repeating over and over again. And then I can use the smooth brush to deal with any sort of distortion that we get along the edge of that. Let's smooth this area out so we can see it a bit better. So I'll repeat this. I'll pinch along this edge, and then replay that stroke with Alt-1. So I'm just pressing the Alt-1 button over and over again to keep repeating that stroke. If I hold down the Alt key, I can pinch in with the pinch brush, draw a crease down this way, and maybe turn my draw size down, and then replay that stroke. I'm just hitting that button over and over again, and then I'll smooth the transition area to get rid of any stretched faces. Then we'll come into this area here, and we'll pinch this without holding down the Alt key, so we get a nice raised pinch, and then replay that stroke. Smooth out the transitions, and we're starting to get these nice sort of compound machined forms. Let's hold down the Alt key here, and we'll do a negative pinch this way. Turn our draw size down, turn our Z intensity up, and then replay that stroke. And there you see the effect that we get. And then we can just run a little smooth along it to fix up any sort of noise along the edges. We'll do another one here. Do a negative pinch from here. This brush is too big. Let's turn our brush size down. Do a negative pinch from here to here. And then replay that stroke. Do a little smooth on that. And then hold down the Alt key, and we can sharpen that edge like that. Replay that stroke. Or if we undo that, I can pinch this with a positive value. So we got to be careful not to accidentally pinch this area here. So I'm going to mask that out so we don't affect that panel line. It's the easiest way to take care of this, and mask this so we don't affect that panel line. And then I will pinch with a raised value here. And then replay that stroke. There we go. And then smooth that transitional area to get rid of any stretched faces. There we go. So being able to pinch like this and replay your stroke is really valuable. Now, in addition to Lazy Radius, you can turn on Backtrack. Now, Backtrack will allow you to confine your stroke to various paths. So we'll change it to line. We'll turn on Snap to Track, which forces our stroke to follow that line. And we'll turn up Track Curvature so it follows the curvature underneath the brush. So let's go to the Dam Standard brush for this. Turn on Backtrack, Line, Snap to Track, and turn Track Curvature all the way up. And we're going to create a straight panel line here. We're going to create a panel line that goes from here to here. And then backtrack across your brush, and it will conform your brush to that line, and it sort of forces it to follow that line. We turn our draw size down, and we draw a panel line this way, and then we'll just replay the stroke. So this is a really nice way to put panels into an object, just like that. Now let's say we want to do another panel that runs this way. Let's go ahead and let's create a straight line that runs from here to here. And we backtrack that stroke, and we can replay it if we want to deepen it further. We can change from line to path, and that will force the brush to follow a path curve. So I can trace the path curve here of this panel line. Let's snap to a side view and zoom into this so it's a bit easier to see. We'll trace this line right here. And then backtrack. It forces it to follow that path. Turn my Z intensity up and just replay that stroke. And you see it forces it along that path that we drew. Now I'm going to turn my lazy radius down so there's not so much of a delay on that brush, so we can get this little section right here. Let's turn let's turn lazy radius all the way down and go from here to here. And we'll turn lazy mouse off entirely and just get that fixed just like that and replay that stroke. And there we go. Run a little bit of a smooth along there. And then let's turn lazy mouse back on. So you can see that these stroke controls give you an enormous amount of variety of the different types of shapes you can create on the surface. If we go back to path, and let's go to pinch. Let's do the pinch brush along a path, snap to track with track curvature all the way up, and let's pinch a path from here to here. Then we backtrack along it. Oh, we're still on the damn standard brush, but that works. Let's turn our Z intensity down, turn our draw size down, and then replay that stroke. And it repeats. Now, if we want to pinch that edge, we'll go to B for brush, P for pinch, the I hotkey, make sure that we are on path with snap to track and track curvature all the way up. And then we can just pinch along this edge, just draw the path that we want to trace, and then backtrack along it to pinch it. And then I'll turn my draw size down real small and replay that stroke, and that'll give me a nice sharp edge there. Now it is going to stretch faces, but the pinch will be stronger than the smooth brush, so I can come in here with a smooth brush and fix that stretching just by running smooth across that a couple times. We can do the same thing here. We'll pinch this edge here, and then backtrack along it. Basically, I just run my brush back along that edge, and then use my hotkey for replay stroke, and then I can smooth to fix those stretched edges. This is a separate Z tool. That's a separate subtool on the underside there. If we solo that, you can see I have an inner shell, and I have this green metallic material assigned to it. So I'm just going to go to color, fill object, make sure the whole thing is filled with that material. And then we'll go back to our outer face and change back to our basic material too. And there you go. We see we've got that nice secondary material peeking out in the underside. So we're getting some neat shapes here. Let's go back to our line, and let's change to let's do damn standard and change to line, and let's change to a different alpha here. What's a good alpha to use for this? Let's choose the arrow alpha. There we go. Let's turn our draw size down. We're at our lower subdivision level on this mesh right now, so let's go ahead and step up to the highest subdivision level on the faceplate, and that's going to give us more geometry that we can work with and sharper lines. So I'm going to draw a line, backtrack it, and then just replay my stroke. Let's turn our draw size down, and let's do another one here. Replay that. We can get nice, sharp detailing here. Maybe we'll do another one this way. There we go. Now, the rest of the stroke menu is dealing with curves, and the curves we talk about in some other chapters. The curve brushes we use with the insert mesh brushes along a curve. We also use curves with the topology retopology brushes, as well as a couple other tools within ZBrush. They will rely on curves. So these are not so much related to the brush strokes as we're dealing with them now sculpturally. They're more dealing with brushes that rely on instancing geometry along curves and other uses. The main thing that I wanted us to understand was Lazy Mouse, Backtrack, and Snap to Track. Now there's also a tool here, No Back and Forth. If I switch to the Clay Tubes brush, this was introduced in the previous version of ZBrush. If we take the Clay Tubes brush, turn off No Back and Forth, and then draw, if we go back and forth, it will build up as it goes. If we turn off or turn on No Back and Forth, I draw a stroke, and then when I back across it, it won't build it up again. So this is helpful when you want to build something up to a single layer. So let's say I start here, and I start crisscrossing, and I'm building things up without doing back and forth. It only adds on that first stroke across. Then I can select my Trim Dynamic brush and trim back that surface that we built up. So no back and forth is basically a way of limiting the buildup on your brush, and that can be helpful, and I encourage you to explore that. With ZBrush brushes, there's only so much that you can learn from being shown brushes in action. And I'll show you a lot of brushes in action. I already have over the course of these videos, and you will see more. But the best thing that you can do to learn the brushes is to pick up a polysphere and just start experimenting, seeing what you come up with when you tweak the settings on your own. Because what works for one person in terms of ZBrush brushes is not necessarily what another person's going to find that they prefer. So you're best off sort of experimenting with sphere sculptures and seeing what you can come up with on your own. I always say that there's about 5 brushes that everybody uses, and I've taught you my 5 in the first videos of this lesson series, but I think in time you'll find that you may have 5 you prefer over mine, and those will be the brushes that you use. I want to create a indentation here, so I'm going to go to the standard brush, drag rectangle stroke, and let's do this concentric circle alpha like this one here, and I'll hold down the Alt key and just click and drag. No, I don't like the look of that one. Let's go to a different one. Let's just go to this alpha here. And let's hold down the Alt key, click and drag, and then I'll replay that stroke. There we go. And then I'm going to switch to the underlayer here, go to my Trim Dynamic brush, and I'm just going to trim this down so it'll reveal some of that circular form a bit better. There we go. Now let's select this one again, and I'll go to my Dam Standard brush, go back to our default alpha. By the way, if you ever want to reset a brush, go to your brush menu, and there is Reset Current Brush at the bottom, and that makes it very, very easy just to reset whatever your brush settings were previously. So we can go ahead and carve that in, and then replay that stroke a few times to get rid of that little island of faces there that we don't want. Turn my draw size up, and we'll replay that stroke again. Now, by the way, when you're using the Trim Dynamic brush, or excuse me, when you're using the Dam Standard brush, there's a neat thing in here that you might not be aware of. If you start drawing a stroke and then press and hold the Shift key, so let me undo that. Touch down with the brush, press Shift, you end up with this red line, and it gives you a readout of your angles. If I let go of that, it will draw a stroke in that angle, and then I could replay that straight line a few times as well, and that's another nice way of making paneling. We'll do that again. You just hold down the Shift key, and 0 is going to be straight across. There we go. And then we will just replay that stroke a few times, and that'll carve a panel straight through there. So that is the stroke menu using Backtrack and Lazy Mouse and a few of the other more useful settings that are available to you in there. I hope that's been helpful and you can find this useful and start to experiment with these settings on your own. There's no limit to what you can accomplish with just combining your stroke settings, your alpha, and your brushes. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next lesson.